but it doesn't seem to be working. Something strange is going on here. But I think I'll just keep playing through and see if it comes active. I don't know why it's not showing up. Not sure. Not sure. Can you hear me? Might have to refresh that. I think that's what I need to do. Oh, there we go. Okay, so what I'm doing now is, I don't know, I'm going to run a story here about William Carpenter's 100 proofs, and we're going to see if we can run it through. I'm not sure if everything's showing up here right, but let's go here. See if it's running. Okay, let's run. Gonna run with it. So what I was doing is I was going through my computer one day. Put that on. Bring that up. And I come across a wonderful little article, a nice little book. What is it? 100 proofs. The Earth is not a globe. So let's see. And there it is. William Carpenter's. It was written 1885. I'll get a little closer look on this. And we can thumb through the pages here. Earth is not a globe, 100 proofs. So what I've done is I've taken all the text in here, verbatim, and we'll go through the book a little bit at a time here, and I'll try and put some modern context onto the book. We'll see where it takes us from here. So we'll do a little bit of reading on the book and bring ourselves through it. Okay, no problem. I'll try and keep it quiet for you, Rory. Okay, 100 proofs that the Earth is not a globe. Dedicated to Richard A. Proctor, Esquire, the greatest astronomer of the age, by W. M. Carpenter, referee for John Hampton, Esquire, celebrated scientific wager in 1870. Another Common Sense Astronomy, 1866, Proctor's Planet Earth, Delusion Day, upright, downright, straightforward, Baltimore, printed and published by the author, 1885. Now I think a lot of the same stuff goes on now as it used to. So this is being taken straight from the book. Starting after that, the following extract was taken from Birmingham Weekly Mercury of February 15, 1890, and must have been first published very soon after the experiment on the Bedford Canal, when that professor fraudulently appropriated the sum of £1,000. Now that number differs later in the book, so I'm just doing it word for word, verbatim from the book. On the grossly false plea that he had proved the curvature on 6 miles of the surface. water of that canal. So let's see if we can get some argument on that.
The Bedford level experiment was performed numerous times in the mid to late 1800s by Samuel Rowbotham, the author of Zetetic Astronomy and Earth Not a Globe. The experiment was conducted in a 6-mile stretch of the Old Bedford River in Norfolk, England. Rowbotham used a telescope positioned 8 inches above the water and observed a friend in a boat with a flag on its mast positioned 3 feet above the water. If accepted calculations of supposed Earth curvature were correct, at a distance of 5 miles, there would be a measurable drop of 6 feet due to the Earth's curvature, and the flag would not be visible. John Hampden, a friend and supporter of Rowbotham, offered a sum of £500 sterling to anyone who could prove curvature and disprove the Bedford level experiment. A close colleague of Charles Darwin accepted the bet. His name was Sir Alfred Russel Wallace. Wikipedia and many other modern scientific references claim that Wallace easily debunked Rowbotham by factoring in atmospheric refraction and supposedly proving curvature of water in a 6-mile stretch of the Bedford River. Wikipedia also states that the referee of the experiment was the editor of a scientific journal called The Field, and that he promptly paid Wallace after he easily won the wager. Here's what Wikipedia and other science books fail to explain. The referee in question was John Henry Walsh, editor of The Field. He was not present on the day of the bet and was replaced by a local apothecary named Mr. Culture. An apothecary, by the way, is similar to a pharmacist and was responsible for making all known medications of that era, including very potent opiate painkillers. John Hampden stated in his manuscript, The Bedford Canal Swindle Exposed, that Culture was a major slacker and paid no attention whatsoever to the specific variables of the bet. Alfred Wallace had complete control of all factors and measurements necessary to manipulate the experiment to demonstrate imaginary curvature of water. Concerning Wikipedia's explanation of atmospheric refraction, it is interesting to note that to this day, there is no concrete way to calculate refraction because the supposed variables, which are constantly changing, including air temperature, atmospheric pressure, and relative humidity, are nearly impossible to gauge and create a general accepted standard. This seems like another case of special relativity, which was created by Einstein to debunk the Michelson-Morley experiment. If you're not familiar with Michelson-Morley, check it out, watch some videos, very interesting stuff. You will be shocked at what you discover. Wallace was also close friends with Charles Darwin and instrumental in Darwin's theory of natural selection. Both were members of the Royal Geographical and Geological Societies of London, and both had ties to Freemasonry and British royalty. The Bedford level experiment had to be debunked at any cost because it challenged the Newtonian paradigm, which still governs scientific theory today. Linear causality does not account for quantum mechanics and spiritual components, which are beginning to cause a massive rift in the left brain logical scientific community that is without explanation for a lot of observable phenomena we witness today. Rowbotham and Hampden were up against some of the most powerful.
An engineer of 30 years standing writes to a magazine in 1874, quoting the following sentences as the result of his experience in the construction of railways. More especially, I am thoroughly acquainted both with the theory and practice of civil engineering, However bigoted some of our professors may be in the theory of surveying according to the prescribed rules, yet it is well known amongst us that such theoretical measurements are incapable of any practical illustration. All our locomotives are designed to run on what may be regarded as true levels or flats. There are, of course, partial inclines or gradients here and there, but they are always accurately defined and must be carefully traversed. But anything approaching to 8 inches in the mile, increasing as the square of the distance, could not be worked by any engine that was ever yet constructed. Taking one station with another all over England and Scotland, it may be positively stated all platforms are on the same relative level. The distance between the eastern and western coast of England may be set down as 300 miles. If the prescribed curvature was indeed as represented, the central station, say at Rugby or Warwick, ought to be close upon 3 miles higher than a chord drawn from the two extremities. If such was the case, there is not a driver or a stoker within the kingdom that would be found to take charge of the train. As long as they know the pretended curve to be mere theory, they do not trouble themselves about what would be stated in the tables of the geographers. But we can only laugh at those of our readers. Others who seriously give us credit for such venturesome exploits as running trains round spherical surfaces. Horizontal curves on levels are dangerous enough. Vertical ones would be 1,000 times worse, and with our rolling stock constructed as at present physically impossible. There are several other reasons why such locomotion on iron rails would be as implacable as carrying trains through the air. Oh, that's cool enough. I'm a little shy with my voice. See if we have any background music. Continuing on with the book. Introduction. I think we'll speed this up a touch. Put up to about there. Introduction. Parallax. The founder of the static philosophy is dead, and it now becomes the duty of those, especially who knew him personally, who labored with him in the cause of truth against error, to begin anew the work which has been left in their hands. Dr. Samuel B. Robotham finished his early labors in England, the country of his birth, December 28, 1884, at the age of 89. He was certainly one of the most gifted of men, and though his labors public lecturer were confined within the limits of the British Isles, his published work is known all over the world, and is destined to live and be republished when books on the now popular system of philosophy will be considered in no other light than as bundles of waste paper. For several years did Parallax spread a knowledge of facts, which formed the basis of his system, without the lightest recognition from newspapers, press, until, in January 1849, the people were informed by Wilts Independent that lectures had been delivered by a gentleman adopting the name of Parallax. To prove modern astronomy unreasonable and contradictory, that great skill was shown by the lecturer, and that he proved himself to be thoroughly acquainted with the subject in all its bearings. Such was the beginning, but the end will not be so easily described. The truth will always find advocates, men who care not a snap of their fingers for the mere opinion of the world, whatever form it may take, whilst they know that they are the masters of the situation, and that reason is king. In 1867, Parallax was described as the paragon of courtesy, good temper, and masterly skill in debate. The author of the following hastily gotten up pages is proud of having spent many a pleasant hour in the company of Dr. Samuel Burley Robotham. A complete sketch of synthetic philosophy is impossible in such a small pamphlet, and many things necessary remain unsaid, perhaps might have been touched upon, but which to some extent have interfered with the plan laid down. The bringing together in a concise form 100 proofs that the earth is not a globe may, however, be gathered indirectly from arguments in these pages as to the real nature of the earth, the dry land on which we live, and the heavenly bodies which were created for us. The reader is requested to be patient in the matter, and not expect a flood of light to burst in upon him at once. Through the dense clouds of opposition and prejudice which hang all around, old ideas have to be gotten rid of by some people before they can entertain new, and this is especially be the case in the matter of the sun, which we are taught by Mr. Proctor as follows. The globe of the sun is so much larger than the earth that no less than 1,250,000 globes as large as the earth would be wanted to make up together a globe as large as the sun. Whereas we know that, as it is demonstrated that the sun moves around over the plane earth, its size is proportionately and necessarily less. We can then easily understand that day and night, the sea on, and brought about by the sun's daily circuits around the course concentric with the north, diminishing in their extent to the end of June, and increasing until the end of December, the equatorial region being the area covered by this mean motion. If, then, these pages serve but to arouse the spirit of inquiry, the author will be satisfied. Into the prologue now. "100 proofs that the earth is not a globe. If man uses the senses which God has given him, he gains knowledge. If he uses them not, he remains ignorant." Mr. R.A. Proctor, who has been called the greatest astronomer of the age, says the earth on which we live and move seems to be flat. Now, he does not mean that it seems to be flat to the man who shuts his eyes in the face of nature, or who is not in full possession of his senses. No, but to the average common sense, wide awake, thinking man. He continues, that is, though, that there are hills and valleys on its surface, yet it seems to extend to all sides in one and the same general level. Again, there seems nothing to prevent us from traveling as far as we please in any direction towards a circle all around us, called the horizon. The sky seems to meet the level of Earth. The level of Earth, Mr. Proctor knows right well what he is talking about. For the book from which he takes his words, Lessons in Elementary Astronomy, was written, he tells us, to guard the beginner against the captious objections which, from time to time, being urged against accepted astronomical theories. The things which are to be defended, then, are these accepted astronomical theories. It is not truth that is to be defended against the assaults of error. Oh no, simply theories, right or wrong, because they've been accepted. Accepted? Why? They have been accepted because it is thought to be worthwhile to look at them. Thought not to look at them. Sir John Herschel says, we shall take for granted the outset the Copernican system of the world. He did not care whether it was a right system or a wrong one.
Okay, item 26. Move seat to the rear of capsule.
Into it. Forsooth, the theories are accepted. Of course, the men who have accepted them are men who will naturally defend them, if they can. So Richard A. Proctor tries his hand, and we shall
okay, item 29. Release seatbelt.
His book was published without any date to it at all, but there is internal evidence which will fix matter closely. We read the carrying out of the experiments of the celebrated scientist Alfred R. Wallace to prove the convexity of the surface standing water, which
integrity is checked. Your parachutes are not deployed.
For the purpose
item 32. Verify cutaway knife handle strap is attached and knife in proper position.
Who had wagered that sum upon the conviction that the said surface is always level one. Mr. Proctor says that the experiments was lately tried in a very amusing way, or in about the year 1870. Then Mr. Proctor wrote his book, and instead of being ignorant
Felix, give me a short count
of the experiment, he knew all about them.
Stow umbilical.
The amusing part of the business that
disconnect both oxygen supply hoses. Okay, are they disconnected?
Just waiting for the next bit. We'll see when it comes up. Sorry. I'm not a professional. Gotta have a cup of coffee. And here it comes. After some time. We'll let it catch up a bit. I might read it too fast. Or Mr. Wallace wrongfully claimed the 500 pounds and got it. Or it was amusing that Mr. Hampden was the victim of the false claim. It is hard to say. The way in which the experiment was carried out is, to all intents and purposes, just the way in which Mr. Proctor states that it can be tried. He says, however, that the distance involved in the experiment should be 3 or 4 miles. Now Mr. Wallace took up 6 miles in his experiment and was unable to prove that there is any curvature, though he claimed the money and got it. Surely it would be amusing for anybody to expect to be able to show the curvature of the Earth in 3 or 4 miles, as Mr. Proctor suggests. Nay, it is ridiculous, but the greatest astronomer of the age says a thing can be done, and he gives a diagram showing how the roundness of the Earth can be proved by means of 3 boats on a large sheet of water, 3 or 4 miles. But though the accepted astronomical theories be scattered to the winds, we charge Mr. Proctor either that he was never made the experiment with the 3 boats, or that he has the experiment did not prove what he says it will. Accepted theories, indeed, are they to be bolstered up with absurdity and falsehood? Why, if it were possible to show the 2 ends of a 4-mile stretch of water to be on a level, with the center portion of that water bulged up, the surface of the Earth would be a series of 4-mile curves. But Mr. Proctor says we can set 3 boats in a line of the water as A, B, and C. If equal mass are placed on these boats, and we place a telescope as shown, so that when we look through it we see the tops of mass A and C, we find the top of mass B is above the line of sight. Now here is the don't know what that is. Mr. Proctor either knows he ought to know that we shall not find anything of the sort. If he has ever tried the experiment, he knows that the 3 masts will range in a straight line, just as common sense tells us they will. If he has not tried the experiment, he should have tried it, or have paid attention to the details of the experiment by those who have tried similar ones a score of times again. Mr. Proctor may take either horn of the dilemma he pleases. He is just as wrong as a man can be. Either way, he mentions no names, but he says a person has written a book in which he said that it had tried such an experiment as above, and found that the surface of the water was curved. That person was Parallax, the founder of the synthetic philosophy. He continues, another person seems to believe the first, and became certain that the Earth is flat, as to wager a large sum of money. If that 3 boats were placed in figure 7, the middle one would not be above the line joining 2 others. That person was John Hampden, and says Mr. Proctor, unfortunately for him, someone had more sense agreed to take his wager, and of course won his money. Now someone had more sense than Mr. Wallace, says Mr. Proctor, in continuation. He, Hampden, was rather angry, and it was a strange thing that he was not angry with himself for being so foolish, or with the person who said he had tried the experiment, so led him astray, but the person who has took his money. Here then, we see that Mr. Proctor knows better than say the experiments conducted by Parallax were things of imagination only, or that a wrong account had been given of them, and it would be well if he knew better than to try to make his readers believe that either one or the other of these things is in fact. But there's the old Bedford Canal now, and there are 10,000 tens of thousand places where the experiment may be tried. Who then are the foolish people? Those who believe the record of the experiments made by the searchers after the truth, or those who shut their eyes to them, throw a doubt upon the record. Charge the conductors of the experiments with dishonesty, never conduct similar experiments themselves, and declare the results of such experiments to be so and so, when the declaration can be proved to be false by any man with a telescope in 24 hours. If Mr. Proctor, the sphericity of the earth cannot be proved in the way in which you tell us it can be, we tell you to take back your words and remodel them on the basis of truth. Such careless misrepresentations of facts are a disgrace to science. They are the disgrace of theoretical science today. Mr. Blackie in his work on self-culture says, all flimsy, shallow, and superficial work, in fact, is a lie, of which a man ought to be ashamed. The earth is an extended plain stretched out in all directions away from the central north, over which hangs forever the North Star, is a fact which all falsehoods can be brought to bear upon it with their dead weight will never overthrow. It is God's truth, the face of which, however, man has the power to smirch all over with his unclean hands. Mr. Proctor says, we learn from astronomy that all these ideas naturally seen are mistaken. Man's natural ideas and conclusions and experimental results are then to be overthrown by what? Astronomy? By a thing without a soul? A mere theoretical abstraction? The outcome of the dreamer? Never. I, the greatest astronomer of the age, is not the man, even, who can do much as attempt to manage the business. We find, says Mr. Proctor, that the earth is not flat, but a globe, not fixed, but in very rapid motion, not much larger than the moon, 4 smaller than the sun, and the greater number of the stars. First, then, Mr. Proctor, tell us how you find the earth is not flat, but a globe. It does not matter that we find it so put down in that conglomeration of suppositions which you seek to defend. The question is, what is the evidence of it? Where can it be obtained? The earth on which we live and move seems to be flat. You tell us where, then, is the mistake. If the earth seems to be what it is not, how are we to trust our senses? And if it is said that we cannot do so, are we to believe it and consent to be put down lower than the brutes? It's hard to hear me. Always try it from my end, coys. No, sir, we challenge you, as we have done many times before, to produce the slightest evidence of the Earth's rotundity, the world of facts around you. You have given us the statement we have quoted, and we have the right to demand proof. And if this is not forthcoming, we have before us the very duty denouncing the absurd dogma, worse than an absurdity. As a fraud, and as a fraud that flies in the face of divine revelation. Well then, Mr. Proctor. Hi, pay attention, how you doing? That is admission of your errors. We are tempted to taunt you as we tell you that it is utterly out of your power to produce one. And we will tell you, do not dare to even lift up your finger to point us in the so-called proofs in the school books of the day. For you know the measurement of absurdity which they are composed, and how disgraceful it is to allow them to remain as false guides of the youthful mind. Mr. Proctor, we charge you that whilst you teach the theory of the earth's rotundity and mobility, you know that it is a plane, and here is the ground of the charge. In page 7 of your book, you give a diagram of the surface on which we live and the supposed globe, the supposed hollow globe of the heavens arched over the said surface. Now, Mr. Proctor, you picture the surface of which we live in exact accordance with your verbal description. And what is the description? We shall scarcely be believed when we say that we give it just as it stands. The level of the surface on which we live, and that there may be no mistake about the meaning of the word level. We remind you that your diagram proves that the level you mean is the level of the mechanic, a plane surface, and not the level of an astronomer, which is a convex surface. In short, your description of the Earth is exactly what you say it is, seems to be, and yet what you say it is not. The very aim of your book being to say so. And we call this prostitution of the printing press. And it is all the evidence that is necessary to bring the charge home to you. Since the words and the diagram are in page 7 of your own book, you know then that the Earth is a plane, and so do we. Now for the evidence of this grand fact, that other people may know it as well. You remember from the first to the last that you've not dared to bring forward a single item from the mass of evidence which is to be found on the synthetic philosophy by Parallax, a work and the influence of which it was avowed object of your own book to crush, except that the 3 votes, an experiment which you have never tried, and the result of which has never been known by anyone who's tried it to be as you say it is. So in other words, this guy Proctor, he's a liar. He completely lied. He never done any of the experiments himself. He just keeps pumping the same agenda as everybody else, and they're having the same problems we're having now. I mean, this was written in 1885. So we're going to move on to the proofs. There's 100 proofs. I'm only going to go do 6 because that's all I've prepared. But I'm going to do 6 of the proofs and we'll see what happens. Now this is proof number 1, and we'll read it when I get a little bit of clear. The aeronaut can see for himself that Earth is a plane. The appearance presented to him, even at the highest elevation he has ever attained, is that of a concave surface, this being exactly what is to be expected of a surface that is truly level, since it is the nature of level surfaces to appear to rise to the level with the eye of the observer. This is ocular demonstration and proof that the Earth is not a globe. So writing that very first proof, I mean, got to consider this book was written in 1885, and he's saying the same things that's gone on with us today, without a doubt. As you see, no matter how high we go. Let's go. We'll move on to proof number 2. Whenever experiments have been tried on the surface of standing water, this surface has always been found to be level. If the Earth were a globe, the surface of all standing water would be convex. This is an experimental proof that the Earth is a globe. Now, way back, when is it? I forget when. Maybe they'll show us here. But when they were laying the first transatlantic cable from Valencia over to where? To St. John's, Newfoundland. And if you look at the surveying profile for 1,600 miles, you can see it's perfectly flat. No curvature was accounted for that at all for that cable, and they surveyed it and it's completely flat. So we'll move on to proof number 3. Surveyors' operations in the construction of railroads, tunnels, or canals are conducted without the slightest allowance being made for curvature. Of course not. There is no curvature, so why would they allow for it? Although it is taught that this is so-called allowance is absolutely necessary, this is a cutting proof that the Earth is not a globe. Okay, let's move on to proof number 4. There are rivers that flow for hundreds of miles towards the level of the sea without falling more than a few feet. Notably, the Nile, which in 1,000 miles falls but a foot. A level expanse of this extent is quite incompatible with the idea of the Earth's convexity. It is therefore a reasonable proof that the Earth is not a globe. So we got rivers that are flowing for 1,000 miles with about a foot of drop. How is that possible on a globe? It's not possible on a globe. Now, like I gonna keep saying, this book was written 1885, and I'm just putting modern pictures to it, and they're just going and saying exactly the same things that they're saying. We've got no further nowadays with all our technology to prove to us that the Earth is a globe. It's not a globe. Don't cry. People, don't cry. The lights, which are exhibited in lighthouses, are seen by navigators at distances at which, according to the scale of the supposed curvature, given by astronomers, they ought to be many hundreds of feet, in some cases down below the line of sight. For instance, the light at Cape Hatteras is seen at such distance, 40 miles, that according to theory, it ought to be 900 feet higher above the level of the sea than it absolutely is. In order to be visible, this is a conclusive proof that there is no curvature on the surface of the sea. The level of the sea, ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely. It's ridiculous, though it is to be, under the necessity of proving it at all. But it is, nevertheless, a conclusive proof that the Earth is not a globe.
Light in New Zealand is 420 feet above sea level and visible from 35 miles away, where it should be 220 feet below the horizon. 3. The Egero Light in Norway is 154 feet above high water and visible from 28 statute miles, where it should be 230 feet below the horizon. 4. The light at Madras, on the Esplanade, is 132 feet high and visible from 28 miles away, where it should be 250 feet below the line of sight. 5. The Cordon Light on the west coast of France is 207 feet high and visible from 31 miles away, where it should be 280 feet below the line of sight. 6. The light at Cape Bonavista, Newfoundland is 150 feet above sea level and visible at 35 miles, where it should be 491 feet below the horizon. 7. The lighthouse steeple of St. Botolph's Parish Church in Boston is 290 feet tall and visible from over 40 miles away, be hidden a full 800 feet below the horizon. 8. The Isle of Wight Lighthouse in England is 180 feet high and can be seen up to 42 miles away, a distance at which modern astronomers say the light should fall 996 feet below line of sight. 9. The Cape Gulhas Lighthouse in South Africa is 33 feet high, 238 feet above sea level, and can be seen for over 50 miles. If the world were a globe, this light would fall 1,400 feet below an observer's line of sight. 10.
I know why. Thanks, Kois. I appreciate that. Should I read that one out again? Yeah, I think I'll read that one out again. Proof number 6. If we can you hear me now? Turn that one down. If we stand on the sands of the seashore and watch a ship approach us, we shall find that she will apparently rise to the extent of her own height, nothing more. If we stand upon an eminence, the same law operates still, and it is but the laws of perspective, which causes objects, as they approach us, to appear to increase in size until we see them close to us the size they are in fact. That there is no other rise than the one spoken of is plain from the fact that, no matter how high we ascend above the level of the sea, the horizon rises on and still on as we rise, so that it always on a level with the eye. Though it be 200 miles away, as seen by Mr. J. Glaisher of England from Mr. Coxwell's balloon, so that a ship 5 miles away may be imagined to be coming up the imaginary downward curve of the Earth's surface. But if we merely ascend a hill, such as Federal Hill, Baltimore, we may see 25 miles away, on a level with the eye. That is, 20 miles level distance beyond the ship that we vainly imagine to be rounding the curve and coming up. This is plain proof that the Earth is not a globe. Okay, so that's my start of William Carpenter's book, up to 6 proofs. I only have 94 more proofs to do. So I will run through them, and I'll take some of the advice. I'll block out some of the music, and we'll see if we can go through them all. I think on Thursday night I should have the rest of them ready, and we'll go through 96 proofs. We'll go through the rest of the book. Maybe I should set a time so somebody can come and watch. Yeah, flat as Fook. Flat as Fook. So how you doing, Kois? All's good, I hope. I don't know how well I can be heard. I haven't been paying attention to that bit. Because if I'm talking and then I hear the delay, I get really confused. Easily confused. Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you can hear, and I hope it was okay. I'm finally getting material together and starting to run some shows. I don't know if they're any good, but we'll see. Maybe I'll just get better at it, or worse. We'll find out. You have a good night. Take care. And thanks for watching, Kois. It helps me. Helps me to figure out any technical glitches, errors, things like that. So cheers.